All right, welcome back to Department 1, People versus Robert Durst. Mr. Durst is present. Mr. Chesnoff, Mr. DeGuerin, we have Mr. Lewin, Mr. Milius, Mr. Bailey and Henderson, and Miata present for the people. You may continue with your examination of the witness.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Jurors and alternates all are present.
Bob, when we left off yesterday, you had discussed going to your office on Friday and meeting with Seymour, your father, Douglas, your brother, and the company lawyer. The lawyer's name I forgot. What's his name?
Leonard, excuse me, Leonard Mandel.
You gotta turn on the mic.
Say it again, please. Say it again, please. The name of the lawyer.
Leonard Mandel.
You'd also discussed that your father was concerned and discouraged you from going to the police. Is that correct?
Yeah, the three of them said it would accomplish nothing, the police would do nothing.
Did you disagree with that?
Well, I decided to go to the police. I don't know if I disagreed or not.
You had mentioned that the lady that the precinct that you talked to the day before, on Thursday, took a rather light attitude about it.
The lady said, well, what I said, I can repeat it. I should repeat it?
Well, I think the jury probably remembers that, but did you take offense at that?
No, I didn't know her. She was the voice on the telephone. She was doing her job. I assumed she would have acted that way no matter who called.
Okay. So Friday, though, when did you make the determination that you were going to go in person to the police?
Well, I made a determination Thursday evening when I called the police. And the lady said, if you want to report a missing person, you got to speak to the immediate family, and you got to report it in person.
All right. We've already gone over that you called Jimmy McCormack that evening, right? You have to verbalize your answer.
I'm not sure what the question is.
You've already testified that you called Jimmy McCormack, Kathy's brother,
Yeah.
that evening. Is that?
Who was living with his mother. So I felt that was the immediate family.
Okay. So, just to clarify, where did you spend the night Thursday night?
South Salem,
When did you pick up your dog from the vet?
Thursday morning.
All right. And so, where did you go, or where did you go before you went to the office on Friday to speak with your father and others?
I went to 12 East 86th Street. I was thinking maybe Kathy was hiding in plain view, plain sight. So I went to the apartment, 1520, and it was very apparent, A, that Kathy was not there, but also that nobody had been there for a long time. There were clothes strewn about. It was heavily dusted. There were dishes in the sink that looked like they'd been there for weeks.
All right, let me clarify. Are you talking now about East 86th Street, not Riverside Drive?
Yes.
Okay, so you went to East 86th Street also.
I went to 12 East 86th Street, and then I went to the office.
Okay. Where was the dog?
At Riverside Drive.
After your meeting with your father, what did you next do?
In the middle of the afternoon, I went to Riverside Drive.
What did you do there?
I listened to the messages, hoping there'd be something from Kathy, which there was not.
And what did you do next?
Well, I got this idea that I was afraid that the police would make an effort to do nothing. So 2 years before then, about New York Magazine had a cover article titled, "Who Owns New York?" And they had the photographs of 5 guys on the cover. One was Donald Trump in his 30s. And the other 4 guys included Seymour Durst and 3 other real estate honchos.
Already in evidence, I'm not sure what the people's exhibit number is. It's on our short list, it's number 5. If we could put that up.
18.
I'm sorry?
People's 18.
18? Thank you very much. On the screen now is that front page of New York Magazine. It's dated May the 19th, 1980. Is that the magazine you were referring to?
Yes,
And which one is Seymour?
he's in the bottom. He's in the bottom right-hand corner,
Okay.
and that's our. And that's our former president in his 30s in the upper left-hand corner.
So you went to Riverside Drive, you got that magazine. Why did you get that magazine?
Well, I thought this would impress the police, that this is a serious thing and they should take it seriously. I was still hoping that my dad had been wrong and I would not need to do anything, that they would just accept the fact that Kathy had now been unseen for 5 days and proceed to do what the police do when a person is missing.
I'm not sure I understand your answer. Would you explain a little bit about what your thinking was about this magazine and taking it with you to the police station?
I was hoping I wouldn't have to show it to anybody. I was hoping that the police would accept me reporting that Kathy Durst, who's in her 4th year of medical school, is not going to medical school, has not come home, and has not contacted her immediate family.
So by this time, were you worried?
Yes, I was getting worried.
You mentioned that earlier in the week you were more upset than you were worried. Explain that.
Well, the way it worked was Kathy had done real bad on a real important exam, and she was hoping to retake the exam. she thought that she did not get a better score, she would not be able to intern in the hospitals that she wanted to intern in.
So, in the early part of the week, did you think that Kathy had voluntarily gone off someplace rather than she was missing?
Yes, I figured either her sister Mary Hughes or her friend Gilberta Najami was helping Kathy hide out somewhere.
But then on Friday, what was your state of mind?
Well, then by the time it got to be Friday, now I'm worried that something's happened to her.
Okay, you go to Riverside Drive, you get the magazine cover, or the magazine itself, and what about the dog?
I get the dog,
What did you do then?
drove to the precinct, which was about 10 or 12 blocks away. I could not park near the precinct because the cops, as usual, took up all the parking spaces. So I had to park about 3 blocks away.
Okay, and then what did you do?
I figured I'd take the dog for a walk, come back to the car, walk to the precinct. But while I was walking the dog, I suddenly found myself at the precinct. So I decided to go in and report Kathy missing.
Did you have the magazine with you also?
Yes.
Okay, what did you do then?
Well, the way it seemed with the precinct, anybody could walk in. There were no locked doors or anything like that. There was a receptionist who I told I wanted to report a missing person. The receptionist pointed me to a set of stairs and said the detectives were upstairs. Go talk to the detectives.
You didn't leave the dog in the car.
No, I had a dog with me.
Explain, if you will, for the jury, whether it was customary for people in New York to walk around the streets with their dogs.
Yes, I don't. There are a lot of dogs in New York. I don't know what to say.
Okay. So you go to the receptionist, she directs you to the detectives, which are up a set of stairs?
Yes, and there was sort of a receptionist up there too, who I repeated that I wanted to report a missing person. And she directed me to the detectives all had offices, but the walls were up to your chest, so you could see over everything. And she pointed me to one of them where there was a detective and no one else in the office. It was not Mike Strook, it was somebody else.
Okay. So what you've described, I think, might be termed cubicles, office cubicles?
Good word for it.
Thank you.
Yeah, they all had cubicles.
All right. So did you go to this detective?
I did.
What happened then?
I started to explain to him about taking my wife to the train station in Katona Sunday night and how I hadn't heard from her as of then, and that her medical school had telephoned several times to say she was not attending class.
And what did that detective do?
That detective said, well, I've got something else I have to do in half an hour. so let me bring you to somebody else. And he took me to Mike Strook.
And where was Mike Struck?
His cubicle was 4 or 5 cubicles away from the first detective.
So, did the first detective seem interested or not interested in what you had to report?
He seemed glad to give me to Mike Strook.
Okay. And so, tell us how you approached Mike Struck, or he approached you. Tell us about that.
I told him what I told the first detective. I was worried about my wife because she had not made an appearance since Sunday night, that she was in medical school, and something must have gone wrong because she wouldn't go hiding someplace.
Did you have the magazine with you?
I had the magazine with me, and at some point I brought up that my wife was in this program at Lenox Hill Hospital that was supposed to help her get off of cocaine. That sparked his interest.
All right. Which was it that sparked his interest? The fact that she was in a cocaine rehab program, or that you had the magazine, or whatever?
I hadn't shown him the magazine yet.
Okay.
When I told him that she was in the cocaine this drug rehab program at Lenox Hill, he seemed to get much more interested in what I was saying.
Okay. What kind of questions did he ask you?
Well, he wanted to know how my marriage was. I told him we had our ups and downs, but it was kind of a medium. He wanted to get the names and phone numbers for Kathy's immediate family members and any very close friends.
Did you give him those?
Yes, I gave him Jimmy McCormack's mother, Jimmy McCormack, the sister that was closest in age to Kathy, Mary Hughes, and I gave him Gilberta Najami, name and number, and another friend of Kathy's by the name of Bill O'Brien.
Who was Bill O'Brien?
He was a classmate at Albert Einstein.
Were you acquainted with Bill O'Brien?
Yes, he'd been at our house several times in South Salem.
Any other names that you gave Detective Struck?
That's what I gave him. I had my contacts with me.
All right. What else happened there with Detective Struck?
Well, then he said, he brought me to kind of a bullpen where there was a TV and several detectives, I assume they were detectives, watching TV, and he said, sit here for a little while and I'll telephone the people you gave me the names of.
Did you do that?
Yes, for about an hour.
Had you shown him the magazine yet?
No.
All right. So you sat in a bullpen with a TV and some other detectives, and while he made calls, did you see or hear him make those calls?
No, he was in the cubicle that was 30, 40 feet away.
Okay. And he said, you said it was about an hour. What happened after that hour?
He came out and got me and brought me back to his cubicle and told me he heard the marriage was not a medium, but it was a disaster. We had lawyers. I explained we had lawyers for a year and a half, and we had still spent most of our time together.
Did you tell him whether or not either you or Kathy had actually filed for divorce?
I emphasized that we had had lawyers all this time, and neither of us had filed for divorce.
Do you know what a restraining order is that either a husband or a wife can get against the other?
Nothing like that.
That was my next question. Do you know what it is, though?
Say that again.
Do you know what a restraining order is?
Yeah.
Did either one of you ask for a restraining order?
No,
And did you tell him that?
it didn't come up.
Okay. So what else? Well, first, when he came back to you and said, well, I'm hearing from your wife's friends that it wasn't medium, it was a disaster. What did you say?
I said it might be a disaster, but we're in it together. We're together. We spend most of our time together. I emphasize we went to South Salem House pretty much every weekend together, and we spent time in the city together.
Did his attitude seem positive, negative, accusatory? How was his attitude when he came back to you and said, I've heard that the divorce, I've heard that the marriage is a disaster, not medium. Do you understand my question?
Yeah, just thinking about the two of you have lawyers tends to make you think that the marriage is over. Why have a lawyer if you're not going to get divorced? Well, I try to emphasize that this is a quirk of fate that we had lawyers, but we were not getting divorced.
Okay. Did he accept that? Did he seem to accept that at least?
Well, he wanted to know about putting Kathy on the train when the last time I had seen her was.
Did you tell him that? What did you tell him?
I told him about putting her on the train in Katona, and he was familiar with Katona. He must have taken the train there at some point in his life. And he wanted to know if I actually saw her get on the train.
And what did you say?
I said she was on the station, a platform, with 6 or 8 other people. The train pulled in, the door opened. The people got on the train, the door shut after 30 seconds, and the train pulled out of the station. He said, but did you see her get on the train? I said, I don't know if I saw her get on the train, but there's no place she could have gone other than the train. And we had that discussion at some length. Is it possible that she did not get on the train? I said, no, it's not possible. There was no place else to go. Her and the other 6 or 8 people were standing on the platform. The train arrived, the train left, and then there was nobody on the platform. She had to have gotten onto the train. And then he wants to know, but did you see her get on the train? Is it possible she did not get on the train? I was having difficulty with the question. I felt like being humorous and saying, well, she could have flown away, but I don't think she knows how to fly. I don't know if I said that or just thought it. So then he brought up, where was she headed? I said she was headed to Grand Central Station in Manhattan.
Let me stop you for a second. You seem to be a little tired. Are you tired?
Am I tired?
Yes.
Sure, I'm always tired. They wake us up at 4 a.m.
Okay. Are you all right to go ahead?
I don't know what I'm being asked.
Are you okay to go ahead? Shall we continue?
So I said she was headed to Grand Central Station in Manhattan.
Let me stop you for a second. Explain for the jury and for those who might not understand what the train system is from Katona to Grand Central Station, where Grand Central Station is located, and explain that, please.
Grand Central Station is in Midtown Manhattan, and there are various train lines that go into Grand Central Station. The one that went to Katona is called the Harlem Line, and it went due north from Manhattan up to pretty much the top of Westchester County.
Okay, that's going from Manhattan toward Katona. What about from Katona to Manhattan or Grand Central Station? Does it stop anywhere?
Yes, between Katona and Grand Central Station are 5 stops. Detective Strook seemed to be familiar with the fact that there were stops between Katona and Grand Central Station. And he said, well, let's just assume she got on the train. Is it possible she got off at one of those stops before Grand Central Station?
Well, how did you answer that?
I said, yes, it's possible, but there's no reason she would. There was no reason that I could imagine why Kathy would take the train from Katona and get off at any of those stations before Grand Central Station. And he wanted to know if it was possible that she got off at one of those stops. And I was back at the same place with, yes, it's possible, but I cannot imagine why she would do so.
Explain if you or she went from Katona to Grand Central Station with the idea of winding up at Riverside Drive, how would you get from Grand Central Station to the Riverside Drive apartment?
Take a taxi.
How far is it?
Sunday night, there'd be little traffic, and it would take 5-10 minutes, that's all.
Okay. So take us there from the conversation you're having with Detective Struck. What else did he ask you about?
He said, so let's assume she got to Grand Central Station. Do you know if she got to Riverside Drive? And I told him about how on Monday morning when I come into the city, on the kitchen table, there had been a bottle of Coca-Cola and an ashtray with a cigarette butt in it. And that had not been there when we left Friday night to go to South Salem. So that told me that Kathy had to have gotten there Sunday night and left out the Coca-Cola when she left Monday morning.
Okay. So you told him that. What did he ask you? Had you showed him the magazine yet?
I still had not shown him the magazine.
All right. Did he ask you anything about your family or what you did, or did he seem to know you or know who you, what your
When I
name?
first met with him, I gave him sort of my vital information, my name and address and phone number. And I said I worked for a family real estate business.
Okay. Did that? Did you see whether that made any kind of impression or not?
Well, he was not familiar with my family's company.
All right. So now we're at the point where you've told him about finding the Coca-Cola bottle and the cigarette butt in an ashtray in the kitchen that was not there when you left on Friday. What next happened?
Well, then he said, is it possible that when you left on Friday, the bottle of Coca-Cola and the cigarette in the ashtray were there? And I found myself at that point saying it's possible, but it's not what I remember. And at that point I said, this is important. My family is a big deal. And I showed him the magazine.
Why did you do that? What was your point in doing that?
Well, I was getting the feeling that he was going to say, well, it's possible. You're not sure your wife got on the train. You don't even know that you saw her get on the train. She could have gotten off at any of those stops before Grand Central Station. So you don't know that she got to Grand Central Station. You could have left out the bottle of Coca-Cola when you left. There's no evidence that anything is wrong here. She probably just took off for a while with friends. I was expecting to get a speech like that. And that's why I gave him the magazine.
Did you, your state of mind, did you feel that he was taking it seriously or not?
No, I was ready for him to tell me that I should go talk to somebody else.
All right. And so what was your point in giving him or showing him the copy of the magazine?
I was hoping he would see that this was important, that my family was important enough so that if he did nothing, I would be able to get somebody, his boss or however that works, to insist that they go ahead and do what the police are supposed to do when there's a missing person,
And what was that?
to look for them.
To look for her. Is that right?
Yeah,
Did you know how to look for Kathy?
I had not the faintest idea, other than talking to her friends and family. I had not the slightest idea what to do.
Well, you'd already talked to Jimmy McCormack, right?
Right.
And did he know where Kathy was?
No.
All right. So,
Or if he knew, he didn't tell me.
of course, you know that he had not seen Kathy, and he's testified here that he had not seen Kathy. He testified about getting the phone call from you. You know now that when he said he hadn't seen Kathy, he hadn't seen Kathy. Is that right?
Yeah, I know that now, yes.
Okay. All right, so you show Detective Struck the magazine cover so he'll take it seriously and do what the police do to try to find Kathy. What's the next thing that happened between you and Struck?
I think he hadn't spoken to Gilbert and Najami yet. Gilbert and Najami told him that she had previously, when she'd heard from either Jimmy McCormack or Mary Hughes that I was saying Kathy was missing, that Gilbert and Najami had gone into the South Salem house.
Did you know that Gilberta had gone into the South Salem house?
Not until Detective Stroke told me. He said Gilbert and Najami called the local state troopers from inside your house, and the New York State troopers have already investigated your house.
So I want to
So-
intervene here for a second, and and that is the question by Mr. DeGuerin is not an invitation to tell a short or long story. These are questions which require answers. Listen carefully to the question, Mr. Durst, and answer only the question. Do you understand?
You understand what the judge has just said?
I understand, but it's hard.
Do your best.
Okay. So, Detective Struck told you about a conversation he had with Gilberta, and that Gilberta had been in your house at South Salem. Did you know that at all?
I only found out when Detective Strook told me.
Okay. So what next happened?
Detective Strook said that the New York State Troopers want to meet with you when you get home tonight.
All right. What time of the day now is it when Detective Struck tells you that the New York State Troopers want to talk to you when you go back to South Salem?
7:30, 8 o'clock.
Okay. What, did anything else happen with Detective Struck before you left there?
No.
Okay. So, soon after Detective Struck told you the state troopers wanted to meet with you, where did you go?
I drove to South Salem.
Did you stop at Riverside Drive?
No.
All right. How long did it take you to get to South Salem from
An hour.
Let me finish. How long did it take you to get to South Salem from the 20th precinct in Manhattan?
About an hour.
So what time was it when you got to South Salem that evening, Friday evening?
About 9.
What happened next?
When I got there, there was a car parked across the street from my house with 2 guys in it. I went over to the car. I said, "I'm Bob Durst. Are you with the police?" And the guy said, "Yes."
All right, let me stop you. We've learned through other witnesses that the police in Westchester County, the state police, are called troopers, whether they're in uniform or not in uniform. First, was the car a uniform car, that is, with markings and a bubble on the top and all that sort of stuff?
The car was an ordinary car. There was no indication from the car or from looking at the 2 men sitting in the front seats that they were with the police.
That was my next question. Were they dressed in uniforms or were they dressed in plain clothes?
Plain clothes.
Suit and tie or more casual?
Casual.
Okay. Did they have a search warrant?
Not to my knowledge.
What did you do?
I said, "I'm Bob Durst. Are you with the police?" And the driver said, "Yes." And I said, "Do you want to come into the house?" And they said, "Yes." And the 3 of us went over and unlocked the front door and went into the house.
Now, had you been in the house before, since you left that morning to go into Manhattan, had you been in the house at all?
No.
All right, so you and the troopers went into the house Friday evening at the same time?
Yes.
What did the troopers do?
They walked in. When you walk into the house, the kitchen's to the left, the bedroom's straight ahead, the living room's to the right. So as soon as you get into the foyer, you can pretty much see the whole house. So they walked into the living room.
All right. We call it a house, but we've called it a cottage also. It was, the square footage, it was small?
800 square feet upstairs.
Okay. And was there a basement?
300 square feet in the basement.
And the rest of the house?
That's the whole house.
Okay, so did you, did they ask you for permission to come in the house?
Well, I offered, I said, do you want to come in the house?
So without them even asking you, you invited them in, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so did they look around?
They walked into the living room, and one sat on the couch and one sat on one of the chairs, and I walked around and turned on the lights. And then I walked into the living room where they were, and they asked me some questions.
What kind of questions?
Well, they wanted to know if Kathy could have been upset because of the lawyers. And I explained to them, that she had had lawyers for a year and a half, and that there was nothing new. That if her lawyer knew of a problem, he would tell my lawyer. And nothing like that had happened.
What about when she had come home on Sunday evening from Gilberta's party? Did they ask you anything about that?
They asked, I guess they asked how she was feeling when you last saw her. I don't know if they specifically brought up Gilberta's party.
Did you bring up Gilberta's party or not?
I don't think so.
Did you talk about her condition when she came home on Sunday? That is, you told the jury that in your thought she was loaded. Did you say anything to the troopers about that?
I told them that when I saw her Sunday, she had drank a lot. I think I also told them about her being in the drug rehabilitation program at Lenox Hill Hospital.
All right. What about getting on the train? What did you tell them about that?
Well, they were stationed in South Salem, so they were very familiar with Katona and with the train station. They did not inquire, like Detective Stroke did, about how I knew she had gotten on the train.
Do you remember if one of those troopers was Trooper Harney, who testified here?
Well, one of them, I remember Trooper Harney testified. I did not recognize him as one of the troopers who came to the house.
Okay. All right. So how long were the troopers there that evening? We're now Friday evening, and it's late.
Maybe half an hour, and then one of them asked if they could look around, and there was a stairs to the to the basement.
Okay. My question was how, I want to make sure that we break it up into question and answer. My question was how long were they there? What else did they do, either one of them, to look around, search, and so forth?
They looked around and then asked about going downstairs.
Did you deny them any access to any part of the house?
No, I went and turned on the light downstairs.
All right. Describe that for the jury so we can know what kind of stairs and how deep it was and so forth.
Very steep stairs that sort of made a curly Q. There's a name for them, but I don't know what it is. I went down first, and they followed me. I turned on the lights. From the downstairs bedroom, there was a back door that went out by the lake. I showed them the back door that went out by the lake, and they both commented about how nice this was.
All right. Did they go out the back door?
They walked out just to a little area there.
Okay. And then what did they do?
Well, then they went back upstairs, said goodnight. One of them gave me a card.
Okay. All in all, about what time was it when they left your home that night?
10.
So let's talk about what happened next. What did you do next?
I went to sleep.
All right, that's Friday night. What happened the next day, Saturday?
I started telling other people about Kathy being missing and my having gone to the police.
Who did you tell?
Susan Berman.
Now, Susan at that time was living where?
Beekman Place.
And we covered yesterday that a call from a call from South Salem to Beekman Place would be a toll call, right?
Correct.
So when you talked to Susan, what did you tell her?
I told her I hadn't seen Kathy since Sunday night, and then I had gone to the police on Friday night. And I told Doug Oliver and Nick Chavin and Bert Alamansky and probably Stuart Altman, the same thing.
And that's all, now we're talking about Saturday when you contacted these people?
Yes.
And so, first, what was Susan's reaction?
I don't know that I remember her reaction. I think they all, the combined reaction more or less was she's pulling some kind of stunt.
All right. By that time, however, were you thinking it was a stunt or were you worried?
By that time I was worried.
What next happened?
Well, Saturday and Sunday I stayed in South Salem. Monday morning, I drove to the city, to Riverside Drive. Monday morning, it was reported in the New York Post and the New York Daily News, someplace in the interior of the newspapers.
Did you call the newspapers?
No,
Did anybody in your family, to your knowledge, call the newspapers?
I can't imagine that anybody would.
Do you know how the newspapers got the story?
I know that they follow police reports.
So you said the New York Post, the New York Daily News. Did you say the New York Times also?
No, this was at this point, and really for most of it, not the kind of thing the New York Times reports on. This is gossip.
So what type of publication is the New York Post and is the New York Daily News?
Well, the New York Post is like the National Enquirer. The New York Daily News is a more serious paper.
And what was the nature of the stories that appeared on Monday?
Developer, the Daily News said real estate developer. The New York Post related it to the fact that my family was frequently criticized for owning parts of Times Square with pornography.
Let me step aside for a second and ask about that. In the early 80s, 1980, 1981, 1982, what was the overall character of Times Square?
It was a pornographic disaster. Half the stores were either adult bookstores or peep shows or sex toys or absolute bros. My family had started buying there probably in the early 70s. Land was very cheap, but nobody wanted to go there.
What was the purpose of your family, the Durst organization, buying property in Times Square that was being used as peep shows and adult shows and brothels, as you called it, brothel.
The idea was that this was Midtown Manhattan, and everything else in Midtown Manhattan has office buildings and expensive apartment buildings, and eventually Times Square would have office buildings and expensive apartment buildings, and that the family would someday develop big buildings on these areas that were really unpleasant.
So then, was it or was it not the family's purpose to go into the porn business at Times Square, or was it to clean it up?
Well, it was to clean it up. But in the meantime, if you bought the building and there was an adult bookstore there with a 10-year lease, you found yourself owning an adult bookstore.
And had Seymour and the Durst organization been criticized in the press about that?
Yes.
Okay. So now we're back to Monday morning. There's a story in the Post and in the New York Daily News. The Post is more lurid, is that right?
Yes.
And so what happened then with relationship to reporters and others inquiring of you or trying to reach you for comment?
Well, I was getting telephone calls, and if I accidentally pick up the phone, I was saying no comment. Susan Berman said that what I should do is hire a PR agency.
All right, let me stop you. So you had a conversation with Susan about the phone calls that you were getting?
Yeah.
And what was that? Why? Stop. Let me stop you. Why were you asking Susan Berman about that?
Well, she had called me when she saw the newspaper article.
And Susan, at that time, we know she's living at Beekman Place. She's written her book. You've already had the book party. The book is a success. What was she doing then with her time, with her profession?
one of the things that had come out of her book was that a Hollywood producer named Linda Obst had optioned the book to make a movie out of. Susan was working on writing the screenplay for what she would hope would be a movie.
Okay. What was her connection to the media? What connection, if any, did she have to the media that were now inquiring of you and phoning you?
Well, I mean, her whole attitude was poor Bobby. It's terrible you have to go through this. And we both, by Monday morning, it was pretty clear, to me at least, that any thought I had that Kathy was doing something or other, that this was all a scheme of Kathy's, was gone. Now I was just plain worried.
My question, though, is about Susan's connection to the media. Did you ask her to do anything, or did she offer to do anything for you?
She offered to take the calls from the reporters. She said either I should have her do it or somebody else, or I should hire a public relations company, but then I should absolutely not talk to them myself.
All right. Did you have any conversations with either Seymour or Douglas or anybody in the Durst organization about the news articles and about the calls that you were receiving?
Well, Seymour and Douglas and Leonard Mandel all independently said, I told you so.
Meaning?
Meaning you're going to get a lot of publicity, but the police are going to do nothing.
Were you, was it your idea that the police were doing nothing, or was it your idea that the police still might do something to try to find Kathy?
Well, Monday afternoon, Detective Strook and 3 of his colleagues came over to the Riverside Drive apartment.
Did you have any advance notice they were coming to Riverside Drive?
No, they just showed up.
So when did you go to Riverside Drive to be there on Monday?
I went to Riverside Drive Monday morning.
Okay. And so Detective Struck and 3 detectives, other police officers, show up at Riverside Drive apartment without prior notice, is that right?
Correct.
What happened then?
Well, they went over with me at length everything that I had done since putting Kathy on the train. While they were there, the mailman arrived, and it included Kathy's bank statement. I remember they asked if they could open the bank statement, and I said they could.
All right, let me stop you a moment so we can have question and answer. When they got there, did they say they had a search warrant or anything?
No.
Did they ask to come in, or did you invite them in? What happened?
Well, the elevator operator brought them up to my floor. I opened the door and they were there, and I invited them in.
When you invited them in, I understand that you had discussions with them, but did they look around?
Yes.
You briefly described the apartment at Riverside Drive. It was one of 2 apartments on the top floor, the other apartment being the Doyles, Ann Anderson Doyle and Kevin Doyle. But I don't think you've described exactly what the apartment, how the layout of the apartment was. Would you describe that for the jury, please?
Well, the Doyles had a 1-bedroom, and I had a 3-bedroom.
All right. How is it laid out?
They had the back of the building, and I had the front of the building.
Okay. If you go up in the elevator, you get out on the elevator landing and there's 2 doors?
Correct.
And then what? Into your house or your apartment, your part of the penthouse, what's there?
Well, there was a wraparound terrace. So both the Doyles and I could get enter the apartment either through the front door or through the terrace door.
Okay. And your apartment, tell us, if you were to go to your apartment and go in the front door from the elevator landing, what would you see?
There was a large foyer. Straight ahead was the living room. To the right were 3 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms. And the kitchen was in the back.
All right. So did they ask to see the apartment?
Yes, they walked around.
All right, this is 4 detectives now in your apartment, right?
Correct.
Did you stop them from going anywhere?
No.
Did they look everywhere?
Well, I assume they did. It doesn't take that long.
Okay. And then what happened?
Well, they were there about 2 hours. I went through with them with detail what I had done. When I put Kathy on the train, they went through the same thing that had previously done with Detective Stroke. Did you see her get on the train? Are you sure she got on the train? At length like that, I kept saying that I don't know if I actually saw her walk onto the train, but there was no place else she could have gone.
Did they ask you, either Struck or the other detectives, ask you for a timeline of your whereabouts and what you did?
Yes, that's what we did. We went over everything I did from Sunday night to then Monday afternoon.
Did they ask you to try to remember as much as you could about where you'd been, or to make notes, or to give them notes, or anything like that?
Well, they made notes. All 4 of them made notes.
What about you? Did you make any notes, then or later?
They had cards. They gave me I guess 3 of them gave me their cards.
Well, now my question was, did you make any notes, either then or later?
No.
All right. So what next happened? You said they were there about 2 hours. Certainly you haven't described everything that happened, but what happened of importance while they were there?
Well, late in the afternoon, Dad called and said he wanted to hire an individual by the name of Nicholas Scapetta, who was recently written up for investigating the unions on the waterfront.
Okay, before we get to Nick Scapetta, let me ask you a couple more questions about the detectives. Did you ever tell them they couldn't go anywhere?
No.
Did you ever not let them look in closets or the kitchen cabinets or whatever that was there?
No.
And did they do that?
Well, they looked in the closets, I guess. I did not really follow each of them around.
All right. Had you described the clothes that Kathy had worn when she got on the train.
Yes.
Were those clothes in the apartment at Riverside Drive or not?
No, they were not.
And describe for the jury once again what she had been wearing.
Kathy hated the cold. She had a long tan down coat that went from her ears to her ankles. The coat had 2 pockets in the front, big pockets, into which she would put everything, her purse, eyeliners, compact cases, dollar bills, coins, pens. There was even enough room to put a pad similar in size to what the jurors all have. And she was wearing cowboy boots and jeans.
This was the early 80s. Was it kind of the fad in New York City to wear cowboy boots?
Well, some people did.
And were Kathy's cowboy boots in the apartment?
No. No.
Okay. So now it's Monday evening. The detectives are there for 2 hours. Did they say anything to you, leave you with anything when they left that evening?
Dad said Nicholas Scapetta.
No. My question was about the detectives. Did the detectives, when they left, did they give you any assignments? Did they tell you anything? Did they say what they were going to do? What was left to do when they left there?
I had asked the detectives if they thought it would be a good idea to offer a reward. And the reason I asked that was because Dad said that Nicholas Scapetta's investigator thought we should offer a reward.
What did the detectives say to you about the thought of offering a reward?
They said that would be a big mistake.
Did they say why?
We would get a whole bunch of people who knew nothing and would quote unquote muddy the waters.
Muddy the waters? Did you say muddy?
Muddy the waters. You'll get a whole bunch of people saying that they know something in order to collect the reward, and it will muddy the waters for us.
Nonetheless, even though the detectives discouraged it, did you and your family offer a reward?
Well, before we offered the reward, we met with Nick Scapetta and his investigator.
Let me stop you there, because that's a different day, isn't it?
Thursday or Friday,
Yeah.
Thursday maybe.
Okay, we're still talking about, well, it's the Monday after the Friday when you had reported her. So Monday was the
February
8th.
8th.
Garen,
Sorry?
could we just give a date so that we're...
Yeah, that's what I'm getting.
Just a number date. So
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, he's already said it, I said it, Monday the 8th.
Monday the 8th is when the detectives came over
Yeah.
to the house, the apartment in the afternoon, and when the newspapers carried the story in the morning.
Right. So, when did you first meet with Nicholas Scapetta?
Thursday afternoon,
That would have been the 12th of February?
correct.
All right. So, let's take it step by step. You talked to
No, it would have
Susan?
been the 11th. 8, 9, 10, 11.
You're right, sorry, the 11th. It's about time for a break, huh? You're signaling me a,
And just a few more minutes. We started late.
I'm sorry?
We started late.
Oh, okay. So, when you talked with Susan about all the phone calls and handling the press, did she agree to handle the press for you?
She offered.
And did you take her up on the offer?
I said I would think about it and I would get back to her.
That's Monday evening, right?
Right.
So the next thing would be the detectives have gone, and what do you do on Tuesday?
I hung out. I did not go to the office.
Where were you?
Riverside Drive.
And at Riverside Drive on Tuesday, when did you next meet with or talk with your father or anybody in the Durst organization?
Well, I spoke to Dad and Douglas every day, Leonard Mandel once, and Dad said he'd set up a meeting for Thursday afternoon with Nick Scapetta and Nick Scapetta's investigator.
Okay. Now, without saying what anybody said, were the detectives keeping you abreast or informed of what was going on with the investigation?
I heard nothing from the detectives.
So, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday before the meeting, had you heard anything from the investigators then?
No.
What was your state of mind then?
I was upset.
So now it's Thursday, the 11th. Do you have a meeting that day?
So that afternoon I went to the office and I met with Dad and Douglas and Nicholas Scapetta and his investigator. Investigator's name was Mr. Ed Wright.
All right. Did you meet with them with the group, or did you meet with them separately?
All of us met with them.
Okay. By that time, had Susan been doing anything?
Not to my knowledge.
All right. Was there any discussion that you had with your group, that is, your dad, Seymour, Douglas, Leonard Mandel, the lawyer? By the way, Leonard Mandel was not a criminal lawyer, was he?
No.
Was he a business lawyer? With Leonard Mandel, the lawyer, Nicholas Scapetta, or Scapetta, had you ever met him before?
No.
Just knew his name?
I had heard of him.
And an investigator named Ed Wright that came with Mr. Scapetta.
Correct.
During that discussion, was there any discussion about Susan handling the media?
There was a discussion about how to do it. I might have brought up that I have a friend who's media savvy, whose name is Susan Berman. But they were pretty sure that they did not want to get a PR firm because that would make it seem like we have something we want to hide. So they did not want to hire a public relations company.
I suppose that if the Durst organization hired a public relations company, that would be the next headline in the Post or the Daily News?
Something like that.
Is there a discussion about that?
Well, the discussion was pretty much that we need to get someone to talk to the media other than Bob, and we don't want to hire a public relations company.
Okay, so what next happened after that meeting? By the way, up until that time, had you answered every question, done everything that the police had asked you to do, let them in your house at South Salem, let them in the house at Riverside Drive? Had you done anything to stop what the police were doing?
I did nothing to stop them from doing whatever they wanted to do.
In fact, had you encouraged them to help?
And I remember they made a big fuss about Kathy's bank statement arriving on Monday and looking in the bank statement.
Let me stop you there. I forgot to ask you about that. You mentioned that while the detectives were there at Riverside Drive, the mailman came with the mail, right?
Right,
And you mentioned that her bank statement was there, right?
right.
Tell us what happened about that.
Well, the only thing interesting in the bank statement, there was $5,000 in the bank, and there was another almost $5,000 in cash that Kathy had taken out the week before.
So let me see if we got this straight. Was this Kathy's separate bank account?
Yes,
Separate from your joint bank account?
correct.
And it showed that she had taken a cash withdrawal?
Almost $5,000 the previous week.
Were you aware of that before you saw it in the bank statement?
No,
And what about, you said there was still a balance in the bank account?
yeah, there was about $5,000 in the banks at that time.
Now, earlier in the trial, there was some testimony that you'd cut Kathy off, or that she was having to take out loans and so forth. Was there any reason for her to have to take out a loan?
Objection calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Well, to your knowledge, had she taken out any loans?
I was aware that she had borrowed money.
From whom?
Albert Einstein had a separate entity that made loans to students.
Where was the money coming from that was deposited in Kathy's bank account? She had a $5,000 balance and she'd taken out almost $5,000 cash the previous week. Where did that
Calls
money?
for speculation, no foundation.
Do you know
Lay a
where that money
foundation.
was coming from?
Oh, the money's coming from me.
Still, no foundation, motion to strike.
Just a moment. All the money was coming from me. Lay additional foundation, please. It's subject to a motion to strike.
Were you giving Kathy money?
Yeah, so we had our document agreement. I would pay her $1,000 a month for expenses, and I would pay whatever, give her money to pay the rent and the utilities at 12 East 86th Street, and I would give her money to pay for her doctors and her lawyers, and I would give her money to pay for keeping the warranty up on her red Mercedes, and there were a couple of other things that I would give her money for.
So when this bank account, bank statement came in the mail while the detectives were there, do you know where the money that was in the bank account came from?
That's
Well,
again
it
gonna
comes
call
from me.
That's going to call for speculation.
That's a direct question.
Well, I
You
think
can
it's
only say
not,
what he's done, you can't say.
right. I mean, I'll allow it. Move on, please.
You may answer. You understand the question?
He did answer it already. He already
I
answered
think it was
it.
lost during the colloquy, Your Honor.
To
You
the
know where the
best
money in
of
the
my
bank
knowledge.
account, he testified already. So you've asked and there's been an answer that he deposited money into her account. He described the rate at which he deposited money into the account. I think he answered the question.
All right. So back to back to the Thursday meeting. I may have asked this I don't think that exactly like this, but did, was there a consensus about getting Susan Berman to handle the media?
No.
All right, what was discussed about that? What decision did you come to?
Well, the investigator spent pretty much the whole hour and a half we were there talking about his theory of what we should do to find Kathy. He was sure that she was well and probably hanging out at coffee houses in Greenwich Village.
Did you believe that?
No.
All right. Well, I'm more concerned about what happened going forward from that Thursday meeting. Did Susan begin handling the press?
The following week on Monday, I asked Nick Scapetta to meet with my friend Susan Berman and see if Susan Berman was someone Nick Scapetta thought should handle the media.
All right. Do you know if that meeting occurred?
Yes, and Nick Scapetta thought Susan was great. But I would like to back up.
All right.
By the end of the meeting, Dad had already hired Nick Scapetta. He asked Mr. Ed Wright, who had spent most of the meeting telling us what to do. He said Mr. Ed Wright was incorrectly named. Mr. Ed Wright should have been named Mr. Ed Wrong.
Did he say that?
Because everything Mr. Ed Wright says is wrong.
Did he say that directly to Ed Wright or just to you?
He said it to everybody.
It is now time for us to take our morning break. We're going to break until 11 o'clock. Do not converse among yourselves or with anyone else on any subject connected with this case. Do not form or express any opinion on the case. Objected, but quite a few of these questions were asked and answered, and I'll take that as perhaps a refreshing recollection and preface to other questions, but I think you're at a point now where you don't need to do that, Mr. DeGuerin, so I'll be open to sustaining those objections, but again, I hope that you will not continue this. All right?
I'm not clear on what you're saying.
I'm saying that you have been repeating quite a few questions from yesterday. We know the answers to these questions because Mr. Durst has answered these questions. You're repeating them. I understand it's a way for you to transition into questions that you did not ask. There has been no objection, and perhaps the people are more tolerant than I of that, but it's an undue consumption of time. I don't mind you covering all of this material, but I want you to do it efficiently. That's all.
Your Honor, I'm trying to, I'm doing my best to try, and the court asked me to not object. It's like Goldilocks. It's too hot, it's too cold. If I don't object, if I object, the court says I'm objecting too much.
I never said you objected too much. I just yesterday declined to have you approach when I overruled one of your objections. I welcome your. I've given you an idea that I think that a certain amount of context is acceptable in order to make this a coherent presentation. However, I do think that a number of the questions are irrelevant. There are some objectionable questions. I didn't mean to suggest your objection as, I didn't object to your criticism. I didn't criticize your objection, but there was, as you know, I didn't entertain your approaching the bench yesterday on something I thought was routine, but that was really my only criticism.
Well,
So,
the last thing is that, because, I understand Mr. DeGuerin, they've got a story to tell, you know, their position to tell. And, I'm trying to be respectful and hoping that in being respectful and not interrupting Mr. DeGuerin's direct, which I'll give him credit. Yesterday after court, he said to me, hey, he appreciated that I was not objecting because it was making it go faster. And that's what I'm trying to do. I'm hoping that I'll get the same consideration on my cross. So that's why
sure,
I'm
and it's
objecting.
I meant this as a suggestion to Mr. DeGuerin that it was not necessary for him to repeat as much as he has repeated. And again, I gave you a sort of off the record, we met, and I suggested that the defense need not just rebut what you had presented, but they may affirmatively present a case of what they believe happened at the relevant points in time. And that was my only, that was a guide for relevancy objections. That's all. All right, thank you. Recess.